So why smooth? Let us give you a bit of context here. So the idea of the project came to life when the General Data Protection Regulation came into force in 2018. As you know, GDPR affects all companies regardless of their size. And well, now specifically for micro enterprises and SMEs, to be compliant poses a big challenge due to the lack of expertise and resources, both financial and also with regards to time. Now, of course, the SMEs are the backbone of the European economy, as you can see here in this slide with our data. They employ 2 out of 3 employees and represent over 90% of all enterprises in the European non-financial sector. And well, taking these into account, at the beginning of the project, Smooth did a survey to identify the needs of micro enterprises and SMEs. 100 SMEs took part in it, and well, they were asked about their degree of GDPR knowledge and how prepared they were to be compliant. And here you can see the results of 4 specific areas in that survey, in form of consent, where you can see here that 12% never relied on consent for processing personal data, and only 18% used in form of consent forms. Sensitive data processing, 76% indicated they don't know if they are processing special categories. Security measures, only 35% apply some basic security measures. And online presence, well, you see that micro enterprises, 88% owns a website, 53% a mobile app. But in terms of use, you can see that the numbers are very sparse with regards to cookie policies, privacy policies, and so on. So that is sort of the context of why Smooth is needed. There's clearly a lack of awareness and education when it comes to GDPR. Many companies have no digital background or legal knowledge, and there seems to be no simple and affordable solution to address GDPR requirements for MENS. And that's where Smooth comes in, really. So as you can see here, Smooth is an EU-funded project that aims to help micro enterprises assess and improve their methods to gather and store data in order to be compliant with the GDPR. It's a cloud-based tool, and it's set out to become the reference solution in Europe for micro enterprises to validate their GDPR compliance. It's part of the digital security call under Horizon 2020, and it will finish in January 2021. So we are already in the last phase. I will explain a little bit more about this when I explain later the pilots to you. The platform is going to be launched in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Italian, and Latvian, and with more to come in the future once it's launched. And the main goals of the platform are really that it's easy to use for any knowledge level, that it's affordable, so inexpensive, and that it provides guidance to any sector. Just very, very quickly, in order to achieve our goals, Smooth has developed advanced technologies for the assessment of GDPR compliance, including text analysis, databases analysis, and online analysis, specifically websites and mobile applications. So just to explain, during the registration process, companies are asked to fill in an entry questionnaire with contextual information on their data processing activities, and this info, together with automated test results, is used to produce a report, a compliance report that provides feedback if you are compliant, and if you're not compliant, gives you further guidance on what you can do to become compliant. We have also created, just very, very quickly, another important part of the developments is the handbook. It's available in a web and in an app version. I believe Brahim will later tell you a little bit more. Its goal is really to educate micro enterprises and to give awareness, and it includes a lot of specific information, templates that you can use. There are infographics in it, video, and even access to the Smooth online community. So it's also a very important additional tool, a part of the platform. I will now hand over to Brahim for his presentation on cookies, and I see you in later the end section of the webinar, where I will tell you about our pilots and give you a bit more information. Let me see if I can change the presenter here to Brahim. Brahim, you should now be able to present. Hello, Brahim.
Yes, hello. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, great. And you can hear me also?
Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic.
So, great. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, Brahim. The floor is yours.
So, cookies. The internet would not function as it functions today. It would not be as usable at all if we would not use cookies. We really need cookies on the internet. You, as entrepreneurs, as SMEs, you need cookies to make your website function. For example, to make sure that someone who visits your website and chooses to see the website in a specific language, to be able to not having to choose that language every time, but to remember that language, for you to be allowed to recognize unique users and know if you have 10 visitors on a day or 1,000 visitors on a day, or if maybe 500 visitors have visited you twice a day. Also, shopping cart function, for example, if you have a web shop, it would not function without cookies, because every time you would renew your page, you would have to choose again what items you would like to buy in a web shop. And then finally, it also helps, for example, these are just examples, to help users log in, to remember that they are the right user, what their password is, what their login name is, etc. There are, of course, since the existence in the 90s of cookies, they have been used for a lot of other things too, and we can see on the right side a lot of more advanced use. Starts with Google Analytics, which does not allow you only now to see who are unique visitors, but also obtain a lot of more information. Where do your visitors come from? Where do they live? What kind of demography are they in? What other sites? How did they find your site, etc. And this information and other information can then again be used to even take it a notch further. And for example, with Google Ads or on Facebook or with mailing campaigns, start targeting, for example, persons who have visited your website in the past, to make sure that they will see your ads on Facebook, that you can mail them for specific products, or that you can show them ads when they are Googling for information related to your product or your shop. So hello, my name is, as Thomas said, Brahim Bénichou. I work as a legal researcher at the KU Leuven Center for IT and IP Law, where I focus on new technology and data protection. I'm also a lawyer at the law firm DotEU and co-founder of the online platform My Privacy Specialist that helps SMEs to easily implement the GDPR. Today, I will give you a brief overview on how cookies may still be used without risking a fine and being sure that you comply with all the e-privacy and GDPR rules. So, for a long time, this will look very familiar to all of you. For a long time, the use of cookies has been announced via so-called cookie banners, which in the past especially did not really left any choice to the website visitor to refuse or accept these cookies. Generally, it was something like this. You could see details if you were lucky, but in general, you just accepted them, or you could not visit the website, you could not get rid of the banner. It was long known, it was a public secret actually, that this method of working was not the right way, was not in compliance with the applicable rules. But yeah, almost everyone did it like this, and so the expectation was that there would not be fines or there would not be any enforcement on this issue, especially since there was also a new law on cookies at the e-privacy regulation that would be approved soon. So everyone expected that this would be fine to continue working like this. Which has changed recently because some of the data protection authorities have started handing out fines to SMEs and other enterprises for not using cookies right. And also some DPAs have announced that they will focus more on the correct use of cookies. So today we will dive more into how can you use cookies correctly, because of course you want to use cookies on your website, you need to use cookies on your website. How can you use them correctly in accordance with the e-privacy and GDPR rules and without risking any fines? So let's start at the beginning. What are cookies? Cookies are actually very low-tech, very simple tools. Actually, is a cookie a piece of information that is placed by your website, you as a company, via the browser of your website visitor on the website visitor's device, so on his smartphone or your laptop or your PC, that allows you essentially to identify, to recognize this visitor the last time and to link some information to this visitor. You can compare it actually with some kind of key card. If you have a key, imagine that a customer that would enter your shop or your store, you would slip him a key card in his pocket without him really noticing it. And then afterwards, you can, if he passes by a door, you can know that this person, this customer has entered at that time, he has entered this and this room, and the next time he comes to your shop, you can immediately see that this person has bought certain items last time or has asked certain questions, so you can better serve it. It's actually the principle. You put some information in someone's pocket on his computer, and when he revisits your shop or your website, you will be able to recognize that person and link some information with this person. And so, as I already explained in the beginning, yeah, they can be used for functioning, but also for user preferences, for recognizing, and also for marketing or social sharing. Let's keep it practical today, but I will give some information on the regulation. So the use of cookies will often make that you will process personal data. So the GDPR, a General Data Protection Regulation, I suppose all will know this regulation already, is applicable, but you also have the e-privacy directive, which is actually more specific and therefore precedes, so which sets the rules first, and then only for the things that are not governed by the e-privacy directive, GDPR will be applicable. To make it more difficult, the e-privacy directive is European legislation, but it's a directive, so it does not apply directly in the member states. So every state had to implement the e-privacy directive in its own legislation, and so actually you will have to look at your national legislation where you're active to see what you can or cannot do, to see exactly what you can or cannot do with cookies. But so today we will only look at the European legislation, which is already quite comprehensive, because of course we cannot address all the different national issues. But so if you look at the European legislation, it already says that cookies relate to the storing of information or gaining of access to information already placed on the terminal equipment. Which is the cookie, the principle that I just explained you, and then the subscriber user has to give consent and has to be provided clear and comprehensive information. So the two key aspects here are consent. So every cookie that is placed must have consent, even if the cookie does not process personal data, because this is not the GDPR, it's the e-privacy rules, and it says if you place a cookie, you have to have consent. And also that information has to be provided to the user so that he knows what the cookie will do and why it has to be used. One word, you see some other sources where you find other legal information on how the use of cookies can be interpreted, but I will not dive into those. But it's important to know that you have the e-privacy directive, which was going to be replaced by the e-privacy regulation already in 2018 normally, and which would directly apply to in all the countries because it's a regulation, not a directive. But up to now, this has not been approved yet, and it will probably take some more time. So for the coming years, we will probably be stuck with these rules as they are now. But so what do we remember from the general rule of the e-privacy directive is that all cookies, for example, you've seen on the lower end of the slide, include functional, analytical, marketing, etc. These all need consent. But the e-privacy directive also contains an exception and says that no consent is required if the sole purpose of a cookie is, for example, is making communication possible, or if the cookies are strictly necessary to deliver a service explicitly requested by the subscriber. So the sole purpose is communication. This means, for example, if you have to transfer communication, and you must be sure that the information arrives at the person, then you could first place a cookie that has a sole purpose to make sure that your communication cannot be intercepted. Then it's a sole purpose, and then you would not require to obtain consent upfront. As soon as you would use the same cookie for other purposes, then you would need consent, because that would not be the sole purpose anymore. Also, strictly necessary has to be interpreted very strictly. So only if it's really something that the user requests, that you can rely on this exception. Otherwise, you will need consent for any cookie that you place. But so consent, what does consent mean? For consent, we do have to look at the GDPR because the definition of the e-privacy directive refers to the GDPR. And so to obtain a valid consent, a number of requirements are in place. So first, a valid consent must be a positive action. So the user, the website visitor, must do something, must act. So for example, check a box or slide a slider from no to yes, but it has to be an action. So you cannot just rely on inaction. The purpose here is to make sure that the website visitor understands that he is doing something, that he's accepting something, and that he cannot accept the use of cookies without even knowing it. Second of all, the consent must be unambiguous. That means that it must be a clear consent. The website visitor must understand that the consent he's providing relates to the placement of cookies and what they relate to. It must be informed. This also is related to the other aspects. So it's not only enough that he knows that he will accept cookies, but he also has to know what will these cookies be used for and what can be the consequences for the website visitor himself if he accepts these. Then it also has to be specific. So if these several categories of cookies are used for several purposes, then you will need to obtain a valid consent for each of those. And then finally, a consent is only valid under the GDPR if it's freely given, which means that the website visitor really has to be free to give consent or not, and has to the free choice to give it. So there cannot be an imbalance in power if the website visitor is to a certain extent does not really have the choice because he really needs to accept these cookies. Then it will not be a free given consent, and it will not be a valid consent. Also, again, which relates to the specific part, so it has to be separate. So separate purposes require separate consents. And also very important is that the consent or the refusing consent cannot have any advantage or disadvantage for the person who refuses. So you cannot say you can only access my website if you accept cookies, because then the website visitor would be disadvantaged if he refuses them. You can also not say I will give you a voucher, for example, or a coupon if you accept cookies, but this coupon will be cancelled if you afterwards cancel cookies, because in that case the website visitor would lose a benefit, which is also a disadvantage. So you cannot disadvantage anyone who refuses to accept cookies. So how were these rules applied in the past? As we already illustrated in the beginning, generally you visit the website and you got a banner or not, there was even no banner, and it was assumed that by visiting the website you implicitly accepted the use of cookies, which was the implied consent, which was valid 10 years ago, it is more than 10 years ago even, but which has not been valid for quite a while now. Also, you saw a lot of cookie banners with pre-ticked choices, so the boxes were already ticked, so the user only had to do accept. Cookies were often installed before consent was given, so you saw a cookie banner that asked you if you wanted to accept cookies, yes or no, but actually it was just there for the show to say so, because the cookie banner was just a message. Actually the cookies were already placed on your computer. if you accepted or not, and before you did anything. Then also you saw a lot of cookie walls where, for example, you could not enter a website if you did not accept cookies, or even some websites where you got the choice to pay for access to the website. For example, some newspapers tried this, or you accepted cookies, which allowed them to do better marketing, or you had to pay to make sure that they could earn something. These practices were all not compliant with the rules, but so why were they done? Because everybody did it like that. It was logical that you as an SME, if you can use cookies to better serve your customers, and all your competitors or your colleagues, your competing colleagues, let's say, doing the same, if you would stop doing it, then of course you would have a disadvantage from a competition point of view. So why would you stop it if everybody was doing it like that? And even specialists were often saying that this kind of use, especially for SMEs, was okay, and that nobody would enforce the other rules, especially not against SMEs. Also take into account that the e-privacy regulation was coming and was supposed to change the rules quite a bit. But so then came the shock to a lot of privacy professionals and also to a few companies, because in December 2019, the Belgian Data Protection Authority issued a fine of €15,000 to a rather small SME in Belgium for the incompliant use of cookies. In the meantime, also the Spanish DPA has issued a fine to a bigger company, Vueling, the airline, of €30,000, and a lot of data protection authorities in other countries have already announced that they would put more focus on cookies and that they would start issuing fines for the incorrect use of cookies. So what did these DPAs focus on in their fines and in their announcements? First of all, the most important, of course, that you have to make sure that cookies are only placed when they're actively accepted. So when the website visitor has opted in for the use of cookies, and that he has opted in for each category separately. Also here again, we see that it was important to await for the content to place cookies. And we saw that the first on the Belgian fine, actually there was some kind of banner, and they implemented after their first warning by the Belgian DPA, but then the banner was just there, as I said, for show, and the cookies were already installed as soon as one visited the website. Also, it's important to list all the cookies in the cookie policy, that the cookie policy and the privacy policy, by the way, have to be in the language of the persons you are targeting. So if you're targeting persons in the Flemish-speaking part of Belgium, in Flanders, then you must make sure that your policy is also available in Dutch. Contact data must be mentioned, the cookie policy and the privacy policy must be easy to find, and finally the consent must be easily revocable, because often you see that you can give or refuse to give consent, but afterwards the cookie banner disappears and you don't know how you can revoke consent, or you can find out for which cookies you have consented and for which you didn't. So we're going to the practical part now. How can you implement a cookie policy? You need three things. You need a cookie banner, you need a cookie preference center, and you need a cookie policy. The cookie banner will help you to obtain the consent. The cookie preference center will help the website visitor to manage and revoke its consent afterwards, and a cookie policy will give the website visitor more information on how you use cookies. And what are the most common mistakes? I already mentioned a few of them, or of course the pre-checked consent boxes, that cookies are placed before the cookies are accepted. If you see on the right, you can see a cookie banner of the Belgian national television for the Flemish part, that is, so the Flemish television. And you can see that they have sliders in which you can accept or refuse, and they're all to off. That's how it should be. So if you want to accept these, you have to slide them to on, and only in that case you will accept cookies. But then we see the third common mistake, says that banners are often unclear or made in a way that they really push the user to accepting all cookies, or making it very difficult for users to refuse cookies. And this is actually a little bit the case with the cookie banner on the right, because even though that all the sliders are off, you only see one big green button that will automatically make people who do not pay very much attention click on it. And this button says accept all cookies. So the non-attentive user who just looks at that all the sliders are off will still click accept all cookies, and without knowing it, accepting all cookies. So this is, even though that is quite a good banner, there is some improvement yet to be made, because this will push a little bit too far in the direction of non-attentive users accepting all cookies without them even knowing it. And you see below the acceptable cookies, there is this phrase, accept only a minimum of cookies, which does not appear to be a real continue button. But then again, it's a good banner, but there is some room for improvement. Other common mistakes are that there are too few categories, or that not all the cookies are listed in the cookie policy. So how do you start it? Of course, you have to find out what cookies do you use. If you don't manage your website yourself, you'll have to look at your IT person or your website manager to find out what cookies are used and for what purpose, and divide them into categories. First of all, you have the strictly necessary cookies, as we discussed earlier, for which you don't need to have consent, and all the other categories, you have to split them up in categories also, but for all these you will need consent. Then we get to the cookie banner. You see the example again from the Belgian national television, the Flemish national television, which must contain a very brief explanation of what you want to do and why you want to use cookies. And you must put also the category so people can accept them. Checkboxes and sliders, as already mentioned, for non-essential cookies should be off, and only if the users opt in for those cookies, they can be placed. And then of course you need some button, a continue button, for example, that confirms the choices, the on and the offs, as put in the sliders by the website user. Also a reject all cookies button. And then finally, this is of course not necessary, but it's from a commercial point of view very useful to also have an accept all cookies button, because that will make your website visitor, it will make it more easy to your website visitor to accept all cookies. And after all, you do want your website visitors to accept all cookies. Then finally, also for more information, you need to have a link to the privacy policy and the cookie policy, so that if persons who want to find out more can click through. And then I repeat, the cookies can only be placed after the acceptance of the cookies in the cookie banner. Then the second thing you needed, as I said, was a cookie preference center, which is actually a web page on your website, which looks a lot like the cookie banner, but it's static, because the cookie banner will disappear once the cookies are accepted or refused. But the cookie preference center will always be available on a static website, a static web page. It repeats the info of the cookie banner, and you can see as a user, as a website visitor, what cookies you have accepted in the past, and you can also revoke consent for cookies that you have accepted. This will also need to contain a link to the privacy policy and the cookie policy to make sure the website visitor can get all the information he wants about how you treat his personal data and how you use cookies. Then finally, the third part of a good cookie policy is the cookie policy itself, that explains how cookies are used, and that includes quite some general information about how cookies are used, what cookies are, then what you do with cookies, and very important here is also to list all the cookies that you actually use on your website. So you also have to update this list if you use other cookies on your website, and give some extra information about these cookies. I do recommend to not put a list of all the separate cookies, but try to group them. For example, all the Facebook cookies that serve a more or less similar purpose, group them. That will make it more comprehensible for the one reading, and will make it much less work for you as a website owner to update the list if it's necessary. So with these three parts, and taking into account the tips and avoiding the mistakes that I explained, you should be able to have a compliant cookie policy and a compliant use of cookies. Of course, this is quite technical, and if your business is not about providing technical advice, this can be somewhat too technical. So the question is also, how can the Smooth project help you? And then on our Smooth platform, we have both a self-assessment questionnaire and the Smooth online module. The self-assessment questionnaire will ask you some questions, amongst others, about the cookies you use, but also about a lot of other GDPR aspects, and will provide you some assessment on what you can do and how you should act to make sure that the use of cookies, amongst others, complies with the GDPR and the e-privacy directive. And then the Smooth online module will scan your website for cookies and also provide you some advice on the cookies that are present. You can see the link below, but Thomas will explain more about the pilots that are at this moment still free, which you can enroll to and which will get you free access for 1 year, including the use of the self-assessment questionnaire and the Smooth online assessment tools. So I hope this was clear and that this has helped you on the way to the correct use of cookies. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you, Brahim. I will quickly stop the recording and then start recording again. And yes, welcome, Julie. Let me quickly make you presenter. You should now be able to present.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything clear. Thank you, Julie, for taking part in this webinar. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Thomas, Brahim, and FundingBox for this great opportunity to share knowledge and experience about the cookies. So my name is Julie Michel. I joined EURid in 2017 as a legal counsel, the year just before the entry into force of the GDPR. So as you can guess, my first 2 years were mainly dedicated to the GDPR implementation within EURid. But what is EURid and what do we do? Because sometimes images speak louder than words, I would like to share with you a short video on who we are and what do we do. So please have a look.
Do you know who's building the internet for Europeans? EURid, a non-profit appointed by the European Commission, has been operating a vital part of the internet for over a decade. It keeps track of who's behind a .eu domain name and ensures that any web user searching for it is pointed in the right direction. This .eu is your online European identity. As a European citizen, you are entitled to have your own .eu domain. EURid continually works to provide you with .eu security services for your peace of mind. Together with 700 partners worldwide, our professionals are ready to take your idea online.
How can I help you?
Get your .eu domain.
Voilà, so EURid is the acronym for European Registry for Internet Domains. We are a Belgian not-for-profit organization which has been appointed by the European Commission in 2003. So our role is to organize, manage, and administer the .eu country code top-level domain, but we are currently also administering the .eu in Greek and in Cyrillic characters. So I'm just trying to move this. Voilà. Unlike generic top-level domains such as the .com, for instance, that are regulated by ICANN as country code TLD, the .eu is subject to the .eu regulations. So as a registry, we are responsible to set the policies for the .eu TLD, so in accordance with the EU regulations, to manage the registration database and to generate the zone file. So as you have seen in the video, we work with a channel of 700 accredited registrars, so which are the entities responsible to sell the .eu domain names to the public. So the public, as you know, they are the domain, we call them the domain name holders. So if you are interested in registering a .eu domain name, please note that as a company registered in the European Economic Area, you are eligible. The .eu domain name is a way for organization and citizens to reflect to some extent their European identity online. And since consumers are more and more inclined to go beyond their national borders for their online purchases, the .eu contributes to provide such a wide online visibility. It's important also to mention that we are putting a lot of effort to make the .eu space a trustworthy and a secure online space. Because we have developed some tools that aims to identify a suspicious domain name, for instance. So what are the legal aspects of the cookies? I will not go too far in details because this has been already nicely done by Brahim. But I like to give this illustration that cookies, what is it? It's like, imagine that every time you go to the store, a tag is put on you that monitors the different aisles that you go through and the different items that you would purchase and put in your basket. So that's exactly what the cookies are doing. As mentioned by Brahim earlier, cookies, they are a technology used for remember who you are between web pages. So every time you go to a website and accept cookies, a unique ID is created that represents you as a user and is put on your device. So typically, it contains two types of information, which is a site name and a unique user ID. So there are essentially two types of cookies, the first-party cookies and the third-party cookies. Technically, there is no real difference between the two types of cookies. So they contain the same piece of information, but what differs between them is how they are created and then used. So when you visit, for instance, EURid.eu to check the availability of a .eu domain name, we will create what we call a first-party cookie, and we will save it to your computer. So to remember, for instance, the language that you have selected. But if you consult a link to one of our videos that is available on our YouTube channel, for instance, a third-party cookies, but if you visit it through our website, a third-party cookies can possibly be created by a third-party provider, and it will be passed on from our website. So why are these companies like YouTube and all other social media platforms doing that? It's to target you later with ads. This is automatically the case for the website that are using social media links, like links to Facebook or other social media platforms. So there is often a question which is asked, that is, should the unique ID stored in cookie can be treated as a personal data? So the answer is probably yes. Why? Because the cookies, they cannot be used alone to identify individuals. But however, website visitors may be associated with online identifiers provided by their device, such as the IP address and the cookie identifier. So it's the combination of information that may be used to create the profile of a natural person that can identify such a person. As already mentioned, the cookies are regulated by the following laws that you can see. So the GDPR, the e-privacy directive, and by a recent guideline about the use of cookie as well. I will not go through the details, but as you have seen from Brahim's presentation, the concept of valid consent is required. No, you shouldn't put a cookie wall where all cookies are already accepted. You really need the user to take an action and to accept clearly the cookies that is willing to have. And we have to remember as well that even micro enterprises they have to be careful in their cookies implementation, because they are also subject to the surveillance by the national data protection authorities. For example, the Belgian DPA, Data Protection Authority, has imposed a fine of 15,000 € on a website that was specialized in legal news for their non-compliance with the cookie management and privacy policy. So what can we learn from this specific case is that don't predict consent box and enable consent withdrawal at any time. Make sure that you provide clear and transparent info on your use of cookie. And if your website targets readers or consumers of some specific countries, make sure that your cookie policy is translated in the languages that you target. So as a small companies or micro enterprise, how can I become compliant? So first of all, you need to identify your cookies and the trackers used by your website. If you are not in charge of the design of your website, I would rather advise you to discuss with the website developer to really know which cookies your website need to use. For instance, if you would like to use social media links, if you want to use marketing cookies, if you really need to use those cookies or not. Then, as a second step, you would have to draft a privacy policy and a separate cookie policy, and put in place a banner or a pop-up notification that would detail the use of the cookies. Make sure that your website clearly mentions the cookie provider's name, but not only that, also why are these cookies needed, like the purpose, how long do you intend to keep those cookies, and as well, what is the type of cookie? So is it a first-party cookie or a third-party cookie? So all those details need to be made available to the visitor of your website. Make sure that you block by default all cookies that are not strictly necessary until the user has given a valid consent. So for the criteria about the valid consent, I'm referring to the criteria as mentioned by Brahim earlier. Make sure that you document all consents securely and that you renew them frequently. So usually the consents are recorded by the use of log files, and they are usually renewed at least once a year. And then you have to also enable the user to withdraw his consent at any time. So according to the GDPR under Article 7.3, and the updated guidelines, it has to be as easy for the website user to withdraw a consent as it was to give it in the first place. So this means that as a website owner, we have to enable the user to withdraw his consent via our website, and we should not expect him to withdraw his consent so via his browser. So that's also something that needs to be taken into account. How did we implement the cookies at EURid? At EURid, we decided to use a consent management platform, so to ease the cookie implementation and to support less manual maintenance. So we use a provider, and this tool helps us to really scan and find all well-known cookies and trackers. So our web development department has still some manual work to do because they still have to declare themselves the cookies that are developed via application in-house. They have to declare them, and they also have to classify them. But this tool helps us to automatically block all not strictly necessary cookies until the user has given his specific consent. It helps us to document and to securely store each obtained consent and enable the consent withdrawal. And it also helps us to automatically renew the consent. So it's quite similar to all those things. You could do it yourself, obviously, but these tools really help us to organize and to streamline the organization of the cookies. So we have put in place a cookie banner and a cookie policy separate from our privacy policy. What was important for us is really to ensure compliance, but without neglecting the user-friendliness of a cookie implementation. So we are not using marketing cookies, and we try to avoid the use of social media plugin in our websites, but living in an era where videos are omnipresent, it can happen that we use a link to a video. So, however, if you block all cookies, you cannot easily see a video on YouTube, for instance. So that's how the system is made. As you know, all famous platforms, they are free for a reason. So this is an image that shows you how our cookie banner looks like with the 3 boxes. And this is the page to our cookie policy. So as a conclusion, I would say that the GDPR compliance is a continuing challenge. On the one hand, organizations, they really need to maintain a trust but competitive digital environment. But on the other hand, there is still a growing challenge of keeping personal data secure. So at EURid, when the GDPR came into force, we made a quite long assessment and we decided to manually handle some of the requirements of the GDPR, such as like the data access request, or you know, to keep this register of processing activities. This is done like by us manually. But we have also decided for other parts of the requirements to use some partially automated tools, like the tool we are using for the cookie management. So this past 3 years, we have realized that the GDPR is not only something that can be done once and for all, but that it really requires a constant adjustment. So then, yeah, you should really consider it as something that is not, it's never final and that needs to be reviewed, like your privacy policy and your cookie policy. It's something that needs to be reviewed at least once a year to make sure it's still up to date. So we strongly believe that yeah, the GDPR implementation, given the fact that it's quite time-consuming, a tool like Smooth can really be of a great assistance to micro enterprise and small companies in their GDPR and cookies implementation. So yeah, thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, just don't hesitate. I'll be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie, for taking part and for giving us some practical insight on how EURid handles cookies. If there are any further questions for Julie, please ask now. I will quickly pause the recording. We carry on with the webinar with our last part, and in any case, I invite you to get in touch with us in the emails that we have in our presentations, or just directly to Smooth if you have any questions, and we will be more than happy to respond them. So the last part of the webinar, just very quickly, I would like to tell you about our pilots and how to participate in them. So the best way to participate, or let me rather start by explaining the reason for the pilots. So Smooth is coming, the Smooth project, as I initially explained, is coming to an end in January. The platform is now pretty much finalized, ready. We are fine-tuning the platform and have therefore a pilot ongoing, which is our second beta pilot, which I will explain in a second, where you can participate and help us do that fine-tuning. And then in parallel, we have now this week started a market pilot, which is more simpler, let's say, easier to participate. It's just a questionnaire that will help us to sort of identify where the platform, where the product stays or could stay within the market. So with questions like, would you pay for this? How much would you pay? Would you prefer a subscription service, etc., etc.? So really a market pilot as such. So these are the two pilots now at the end of the project, and we need your help. So please I will explain now how to become a beta tester. There are some rewards as well. It would be very, very interesting for us to get your feedback and help us to finalize the project and also to reach our KPIs. So this a bit about the project, the timeline and the projects. In order to actually learn more about the projects and to apply, we would invite you to visit the Smooth project website, which is smoothplatform.eu, where a part of finding all the information about Smooth, the project, the media, and everything else, and also the contact and the social media channels, etc., etc. So it's a hub. You can find further information. I will just do that. I will click through for a moment and show you the website itself, just very quickly. And then you can actually scroll down on the page, and there is a Get Involved section where you can go to sign up for a pilot, where you have basic information about the 2 pilots that I just mentioned, and where you can also join our Smooth online community, which I will explain a little bit later. Also at the top, we have a specific tab for the Get Involved section, where you have even more information about the pilots and how to apply. So I will just click through here and show you the landing page just very quickly. Here you go to apply, and it will open, hopefully it does, it will open an application form that you have to fill in very quickly. It's just to get your information, to know for us to know which pilot you are interested in, and then to get some information about you, and for you also to sign information in terms of privacy. That is the application form. Once that is done, just very quickly to explain the 2 different pilots. So the second pilot that I just explained, for us to fine-tune the platform still. Once you have done and you have filled out this application form that I've just shown you, you will receive an email, and in that email you can choose a test modality. I will go to the modalities in a second, and an access link where you can directly participate. In principle, the pilot has 2 sections. One is an entry questionnaire, as I explained earlier, where you have to respond certain questions about your data processing context, and you can upload documents, documentation and data for the platform to check it and then create a compliance report, and the user experience, a UX evaluation survey, just for us to find out if the platform runs smoothly, and to get your feedback about its usability. You might think that, or how could I put this? I would say don't panic with regards to uploading sensitive data to the platform. This is, of course, a European project. Everything is, the platform has undergone severe security tests, and all uploaded files are deleted once the algorithm has done its work. So it's completely safe. And of course, you will help us in fine-tuning the pilot. This second pilot has a deadline. It ends on the 15th of November, so you still have time. You still have 10 days to participate. We have extended a little bit the deadline. So please feel free to join us. In terms of modalities, once you choose, once you get the confirmation email, you will get further information about the modalities that you can choose. In the summary, the first modality is just for you to complete the entry questionnaire on your own, on the platform, at your own pace. Usually it can take from 30 to 45 minutes. And what you get as a reward is a 1-year free subscription to the Smooth platform, which is an equivalent of 6 reports. That once the platform is public, after the project finalizes, we think this, especially for micro enterprises, for startups, this can be very interesting. Startups who are pivoting quite a lot will always have a newest scenario, and here they will have the possibility to do several checks via the Smooth platform to see if they're compliant with the GDPR with their new outlook. And then there is the second modality where you complete the entry questionnaire and the user survey on your own. It takes you a little bit longer, and therefore we have added a €60 gift voucher to the 1-year free subscription. And in modality 3, we still have some slots available. This would actually be you with one of our researchers doing the entry questionnaire during a Skype call. So this requires a personalized appointment, which you will be able to do via the email when you click through that registration email that you receive. And here it will, of course, take a little bit longer, but will probably be far more interesting. And for us, we get more quality data. Therefore, we would reward you with a €100 gift voucher and that 1-year free subscription. So this is still ongoing until the 15th of November. Please feel free to join. You get, of course, the free compliance report when you do this pilot, and in addition, a 1-year free subscription, and depending on modality 2 or 3, those gift vouchers. So we believe this is quite an interesting possibility for you. Let me jump quickly to the market pilot, which has already launched as well. This one will be running until the end of December. As you know, the project finalizes at the end of January, so we use January in order to analyze all the information that we've gotten throughout the market pilot. We have a ambitious target here. We want to reach out to 500 micro enterprises, so please help us spread the word. Although rewards are not as juicy, let's say, as in the second pilot, but we still believe it's very interesting because you will get a free compliance report and you will have helped us with just a little bit of your time. So the participation is very simple. It's the same way as in the second pilot. You just fill out the application form going through our website, and you get directly a confirmation email and with an access link to participate. And then you do the entry questionnaire as explained. As a result, you get the compliance report for free out of that entry questionnaire, and then an additional market survey with questions more or less of the type that I've just explained, for us to help to position or to find out where this platform could be positioned. As I said, again, just very quickly, you get a compliance report for free. There are no other rewards because we are looking for a large amount of micro enterprises and SMEs to do this market pilot. But in any way, a part of being compliant and learning about your GDPR and learning about GDPR in general, we believe all this information helps you. So as a reward, you could actually see that your business gets a chance to cut costs of storing data in inconsistent ways. You reinforce your brand reputation. Of course, we are in a new world, and the consumer is far more informed now and interested in privacy. So being able to stand out and to actually use your GDPR compliance to reinforce your brand and your reputation is definitely a win. And of course, last but not least, those hefty fines that Brahim has spoken about. There's always a danger here, and we will help you to minimize that danger. Just very quickly, the online community that I've shown you previously on the website, where you can click through. Let me also go quickly there, is just to show you, or maybe I can do that even directly here on the slide itself. This is what it looks like. We have different kind of spaces. So the online community for us is a way of, on the one hand, giving you help desk during the pilots. So as you can see here, there are different spaces, different rooms, chat rooms, let's call them, where you can address legal concerns or pilot bugs. But also we are building a community around Smooth. So we have different spaces for that. Introduce yourself support, where we post news about GDPR and also foster engagement, interaction between peers. You can talk about your company, maybe even a collaboration as a result of it. So we believe the online community can be something very, very interesting for you as well. You have the handbook that I mentioned earlier. There will be a live feed in the handbook of the web version of the community, so you can see the news, you can see information and interactions, and you can actually sign up for it if you would like at any point. Signing up for it is very simple. The community is hosted on the FundingBox platform. Just very quickly, FundingBox, among other activities where we support entrepreneurs in their growth and get them to funding opportunities. Our platform hosts a wide array of tech communities and has also an own tech community or space that's called FundingBox, where we have about, well, over 30,000 entrepreneurs. These tech communities are sort of built as the Smooth community, so you have different spaces and you can interact with peers, you get news, you are informed about funding opportunities, etc., etc. So of course, please feel free to check out the FundingBox platform. In order to join Smooth, you have to go through the FundingBox platform, but it's very simple. You can see here the URL, space.fundingbox.com. You just sign in. You get then to create a username, and you will then arrive to a dashboard, and you can find the different communities there and sign up for them. It's a very simple procedure, and we do believe that it could be something interesting for you, and we hope, especially in Smooth, we can support you with any questions that you might have there. A part of course, Brahim's, Julie's, and my emails that you can see here if you have any further questions. That is all from my side, and I think from all our, from the three of us. Let me just quickly ask again if there are any questions. If so, I will stop the recording. Any questions? from any of the audience, please feel free to raise the hand or to write the questions in the chat. I'm not seeing any raised hands. So I would say for today, thanks a lot for your interest in Smooth. Thanks a lot to our panelists, Brahim from the Smooth project, partner from the Smooth project, and Julie from EURid, an outside voice, a bit of a practical insight, and also a very interesting organization for entrepreneurs and micro enterprises. Thanks to both of you, and we will upload this recording on the YouTube channel. And as I said, any further questions you might have, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thank you, Brahim. Thank you, Julie.